Let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. Growing old don't hurt half as bad as realizing the people you raised don't see you as human anymore. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to be a burden. Life just has a quiet way of pushing you into corners while everybody else stays standing. My name is Anita Caldwell, and before this whole mess blew up, I was living in my own son's house like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Even though nobody ever said the words out loud, they didn't have to. You learn real quick when your presence starts irritating folks. After my husband Walter passed, the world got smaller. Bills got louder. Friends drifted. The little condo we shared for 30 years turned into a stack of medical receipts and paperwork. When my son Derek said, "Mom, come stay with us for a while," I believed him. I believed family stay meant something. At first, I tried to make myself useful. I cooked dinner. I cleaned bathrooms nobody thanked me for. I folded laundry that wasn't mine and pretended I didn't notice the size when I sat down to rest. My daughter-in-law, Carly, ran that house with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She never yelled. She didn't have to. Her tone did all the work. "You're eating again? That bread was supposed to last the week. Do you really need seconds?" She'd say it like she was joking. But her eyes stayed cold, calculating, always counting. Food, money, space. Especially space. Derek used to be my baby boy. I remember holding his hand crossing streets. Remember him crying when I left for night shifts. Somewhere between then and now, he learned it was easier to agree with his wife than defend his mother. When Carly spoke, he stayed quiet. When she disrespected me, he stared at his phone like the screen was more important than my dignity. And me? I stayed polite, because women my age were raised to endure, to swallow discomfort, to be grateful for crumbs. Every month, I stretched my pension like taffy. I skipped little things. Better food, warmer clothes, medicine. Because I didn't want to cause problems. That's what Carly called it any time I needed something. One morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my pill organizer open. The heart medication was running low. I checked the bottle twice, hoping I miscounted. I hadn't. $10. That's all I needed. My hands shook a little when I spoke. Not from fear, from knowing what was coming. "Derek," I said gently, "could I borrow $10 for my medicine? I'll pay you back Friday when my check comes." Before he even answered, Carly laughed. Not a chuckle, not surprise, a full laugh, like I'd said something ridiculous. $10? She said. "Maybe if you didn't eat so much, you wouldn't need medicine all the time." That one sat heavy in the air. Derek finally looked up. He didn't sound angry. That hurt worse. "You really need to manage better, Mom." I nodded. "I understand," I said quietly. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 3 weeks earlier, I'd been standing in a dusty gas station, holding a lottery ticket I almost tossed in the trash. I remember sitting in my car, staring at the numbers, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might give out right there. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just cried. Long, silent tears. $57 million. I told no one. Not the lawyer I contacted under a different name. Not the financial advisor who met me 2 towns over. Not the family who thought $10 was too much for my health. I needed to see something first, so I stayed quiet. I kept living exactly the same. I watched, I listened, I tested them without them knowing. For 3 months, I asked for small things: patience, kindness, a little respect. Every time, they failed. Carly started commenting on how much water I used in the shower. Derek complained about groceries. They joked right in front of me about finding somewhere cheaper for me to live. They weren't joking. They thought I had nothing, and because of that, they thought I were nothing. The night everything snapped was family dinner. Carly had invited her sister and brother-in-law. Wine flowed. Plates clinked. Everyone laughed, except me. Nobody asked how I was. Nobody noticed I barely ate. Midway through dinner, Carly stood up, lifted her glass, and said, "Some mothers-in-law are useful. Others just take up space." The table exploded in laughter. Derek laughed too. That's when something inside me finally went quiet. Not angry, not sad, just done. I smiled, a real one, because earlier that day, I'd signed papers for a home they'd never see. A place with gates, silence, and rooms filled with peace instead of judgment. 3,000 kilometers away. I folded my napkin neatly, stood up slow, looked every one of them in the eye. "I'm glad you feel that way," I said calmly. "Because I just bought my own place far from here. Don't worry, you won't have to deal with me anymore." The room froze solid. And right then, the doorbell rang. Nobody knew yet, but everything was about to change. That doorbell didn't ring like a normal doorbell. It sounded loud, final, like a period at the end of a sentence I'd been dragging out for years. Carly blinked first. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked, already annoyed, like the sound itself had offended her. "No, ma'am," I said sweetly and took one slow step back from the table. Derek frowned. "Mom?" The bell rang again. Firm, patient. Whoever it was knew how to wait. Derek stood up, still chewing, and went to open the door. I stayed where I was, hands folded, heart calm in a way it hadn't been in decades. Not racing, not shaking, calm. When the door opened, the noise of laughter died instantly. I didn't need to see to know what was standing on the porch. I'd seen it earlier that afternoon, through the tinted windows of a quiet law office parking lot. Black paint, polished like glass, chrome rims. A driver in a dark suit who called me Mrs. Caldwell, with respect, not obligation. Derek's voice cracked. Can I help you?" A man spoke, calm and professional. "I'm here for Miss Anita Caldwell." Silence flooded the house. Carly pushed her chair back hard. "For who?" I stepped forward. That'd be me. Every head turned. Carly's sister stopped mid-sip. Her brother-in-law's mouth stayed open, like he forgot how to close it. The driver nodded. "Your car is ready, ma'am." Car. Not ride, not pickup. Car. Carly laughed once, sharp and nervous. "This some kind of joke?" I picked up my purse, the same old brown one Carly loved to mock, and slipped it over my shoulder. "No joke," I said. Just timing. Derek stepped aside so I could pass. His face had gone pale, like he was suddenly seeing a stranger, wearing his mother's skin. "Mom," he whispered, "what's going on?" I looked at him, really looked. The boy I raised was gone. This man standing here didn't know me, didn't protect me, didn't even listen when I asked for $10 to keep my heart beating steady. "You'll find out," I said, eventually. Carly followed me to the door, heels clicking fast, panic leaking through the cracks of her control. "You don't just leave in the middle of dinner. What is this? Who is that man?" I stopped at the threshold and turned. "For 3 months," I said calmly, "I watched how you treated me when you thought I had nothing. Tonight was just the last lesson I needed." Her eyes narrowed. "You're being dramatic." I smiled. "You're being exposed." Outside, the air felt different, lighter, like my lungs finally remembered how deep a breath could go. The driver opened the rear door, and I slid inside like I belonged there, because I did. As the door closed, I saw Carly rush onto the porch, wine glass still in her hand. Derek followed, confusion written all over his face. The car pulled away smooth and quiet. No goodbye, no hug, no apology. That ride felt longer than it was, not because of distance, because of memory. Every comment, every sigh, every time I shrank myself to fit inside their comfort. We stopped at a hotel downtown. Not luxury for show, luxury for peace. The driver opened my door again. "If you need anything at all tonight, Mrs. Caldwell, just call the front desk. Mr. Harris will meet you tomorrow morning." Harris, my attorney, one of the few people who knew the full picture. Inside, something went wrong. The suite smelled like clean linen and silence. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the quiet settle. No footsteps above me. No voices judging what I ate. No eyes counting how much space I took up. That night, my phone buzzed once. Derek. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. Then again. Then Carly. I turned the phone face down and slept the deepest sleep I'd had since Walter died. The next morning, the truth started spreading faster than wildfire. Carly called first, voice sweet as syrup. "Anita, honey, we were worried. Derek didn't sleep all night." "I slept great," I said. She paused. "Listen, we might have gotten off on the wrong foot. Family says things they don't mean sometimes." I sipped my coffee. "Funny, you never apologized when you thought I was broke." Silence, then her tone shifted. "Derek says you met with a lawyer." I did. "And someone mentioned money?" I smiled into my cup. Did they now? Derek took the phone. His voice was shaking. "Mom, please, just tell us what's going on." I took a breath. 3 months ago, I won the lottery. The line went dead quiet. "How much?" Carly whispered from the background, not even trying to hide it. "Enough," I said. Derek swallowed. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" I laughed softly. "You never asked how I was doing. You only noticed when you thought I might have something you wanted." That afternoon, my attorney laid everything out clean and legal. New home, new accounts, new boundaries. No access, no favors, no guilt payments disguised as love. By evening, the calls turned desperate. Carly cried. Derek begged. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly missed me. Too late, because money didn't change me. It revealed them. And as I stood by the hotel window watching the city lights flicker on, I realized something powerful. They failed the test when they thought I had nothing. And tomorrow, they were going to find out exactly what that cost them. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling across the suite, warm and golden, a stark contrast to the coldness I'd lived under for years. I brewed a cup of coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, and settled by the window, watching the city come alive. And somewhere deep in my chest, a slow, satisfying pulse of power reminded me. This life was mine now, mine to protect, mine to enjoy. A soft knock at the door made me turn. Harris, my attorney, stepped in, briefcase in hand. Morning, Mrs. Caldwell. I thought we should go over a few things before the calls start again. It's inevitable. I'm ready, I said, stretching just enough to remind myself my body still belonged to me, not anyone else's expectations. Harris smiled faintly. Good. First, your new accounts are all set up. Full access in your name only. No relatives can touch a cent. Everything from your pension, winnings, and investments is fully secured. Perfect, I said, sipping coffee. And the house? Fully yours, he replied. They can't claim squat. Legally airtight. And I've drafted a notice for anyone trying to come around without invitation. Security is on standby. I nodded. That last part made me smile. There was a poetic satisfaction in knowing that the same family who had mocked, controlled, and belittled me now had a line they couldn't cross. Harris pulled out a stack of papers. Now the bigger part. You mentioned wanting to set up something for Tyler and Emma. Yes, I said. Full college, maybe graduate school. But I don't want it tied to their parents in any way. It's their choice. They have to want a real relationship with me, not just money. He raised his eyebrows. That's smart. Conditional, yes, but also protective. They won't become pawns. We spent the next hour setting up trusts, funds, and stipulations. Every clause designed to shield me, while still giving the kids a chance at a relationship free from adult manipulation. By the time Harris left, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The future was no longer dictated by fear, guilt, or obligation. By noon, the phone rang. I didn't answer. By 3, another call. Ignored. By 4, emails and texts. I ignored them all. By 6, it got interesting. My security system buzzed. Multiple vehicles were parked outside my gated property. A small convoy, and from the shadows, familiar faces began to appear. Derek, Carly, Kalia, and their little army of relatives, all looking desperate, agitated, guilty. I poured a glass of water, walked to the window, and watched. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. They looked like predators circling. But I wasn't prey anymore. I was the fortress. Then I heard it, the familiar pleading voice of Derek. Mom, please, let us in. We just want to talk. Please. I chuckled softly. Talk, huh? Carly's voice joined, sharper now, breaking the fragile leadership Derek tried to hold. Anita, we're family. You can't just shut us out forever. We love you. Love. Funny word. I'd heard it thrown around while my heart medication cost a fortune, while they served dinner to everyone else, while they taught Tyler and Emma that their grandmother was a burden. I opened the intercom. "Love isn't a feeling," I said clearly, watching them shuffle and flinch outside like schoolchildren caught lying. "Love is action. It is respect. It is kindness when someone is vulnerable. It is including them in decisions that affect their life. You failed the test when you thought I had nothing." There was silence. Then Kalia's voice cracked. "But we didn't mean—" I cut her off. "Yes, you did. Every cruel word, every dismissive glance. Every time I felt invisible. Yes, you meant it, and you enjoyed the power it gave you." I turned to the camera, watching Derek's shoulders slump, Carly's fingers clutching each other, Kalia's face contorting in panic. All the power had shifted. "Now," I said softly, "you can leave, all of you. Go back to your lives, and remember this day. Remember that there is a line between family and abuse, and crossing it has consequences." The phone calls didn't stop that night, but I ignored them. I ate my dinner alone in peace, my living room filled with the soft glow of lamps, not tension. I read a few chapters of a book I'd waited years to enjoy. I went to bed without guilt, without fear, and for the first time in decades, slept through the night. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I didn't jump. I didn't tremble. I walked calmly, unlocked the door, and looked through the peephole. It wasn't my family this time. It was Sarah, my granddaughter. Her eyes were nervous, hesitant, yet pure. No agendas, no manipulation. Just a young woman looking for a connection, not a bank account. I opened the door. "Hello, Sarah," I said, smiling. She stepped inside, careful, unsure. "Grandma, I know it's been complicated. I want to know you, for real." That night, we talked. No guilt, no pressure, just stories, laughter, and the slowly building trust. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't lost a family. I'd found one, a real one, built on respect, built on choice, built on love that didn't demand a price. Tomorrow, I knew, I would wake up in my house, my life, my rules, and every day after, I would continue building that world, piece by piece, brick by brick, choosing peace, choosing dignity, choosing myself. Because I had finally learned the truth. You can't teach people respect. You can only demand it. And when you do, the world suddenly feels limitless. Days turned into weeks, and my mornings settled into a rhythm I'd only dreamed of before. The sun rose over the city, painting everything in gold, and I felt a sense of peace that had been foreign for decades. No more anxiety creeping in with the sound of the phone. No more feeling like I had to tiptoe around anyone's moods. This was my life, my rules, my sanctuary. I spent my mornings in the library, drinking coffee stronger than most could handle, reading books stacked high on every table, exploring worlds I had been too exhausted to enjoy before. Afternoons were for the garden, planting roses and tulips, tending to vegetables that I could finally eat without guilt. The house was alive with laughter and the quiet hum of contentment. Maria moved through the kitchen, preparing meals with love, not obligation. While James polished surfaces, humming to himself, proud of the home he respected as much as I did. Then came the unexpected visits. Not from my previously toxic family, but from people I had never imagined would become part of my life. Eleanor, my bridge partner, stopped by with a basket of homemade cookies. Margaret brought freshly baked bread. Robert shared stories about his late wife, and we laughed through bittersweet memories. These weren't obligations. They were chosen connections. They reminded me that family could be found in respect, not just blood. One afternoon, Rebecca knocked softly on my office door. "There's someone asking to see you," she said quietly. "A young woman says she's a friend of your granddaughter." Sarah, my granddaughter. I hadn't expected to hear from her so soon again. And yet there she was, nervously gripping a notebook filled with drawings from her kindergarten students. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Grandma," she said, voice shaking just slightly, I wanted to share something with you." We spent hours talking. Not about money, not about obligations, not about the chaos her mother and uncle had caused. We talked about life, dreams, fears, and triumphs. She shared stories of her students, of small victories that made her heart swell. I shared memories of Robert, of moments I had tucked away because survival had demanded silence. For the first time, I realized that this genuine connection, built on choice and respect, was more valuable than anything I had ever hoped for from my blood relatives. Weeks later, she returned, this time bringing her boyfriend. They wanted to show me their small apartment, a place they had worked hard to make their own. I listened. I laughed. I offered guidance. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Untainted by manipulation. Uncorrupted by obligation. Through Sarah, I began to see a future that wasn't haunted by the past. I could help my grandchildren in ways their parents never would, not because I was bribing them or buying their love, but because I wanted to. The education fund, set up with conditions ensuring genuine relationships, became a symbol of that commitment, a way to nurture their growth without allowing their parents' greed or entitlement to taint it. Evenings were quieter now. I sat in the garden as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, listening to the hum of life, feeling the warmth of hard-earned peace. The house no longer felt like a fortress. It was a home, a sanctuary, a place where dignity was preserved and celebrated. And every day, I reminded myself of the lesson I had learned through every hardship, confrontation, and heartbreak. Respect cannot be demanded with anger, but it can be demanded with clarity, boundaries, and unwavering self-worth. I had done it. I had claimed a life where love was meaningful, not transactional. I looked out over my garden one evening, the roses in full bloom, and whispered quietly to myself, "This is the life I was always meant to have. Not wealth, not grudging affection, not guilt-driven apologies, but this peace, this dignity, this love built on truth." For the first time in decades, I slept without fear, woke without dread, and lived without compromise. And in that life, I finally felt complete. The mornings had taken on a rhythm that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't known for decades. I woke up to the sun spilling gold across my city view windows, not to shouting, nagging, or the oppressive weight of obligation. I stretched, feeling the warmth in my bones, and walked barefoot across polished floors to the kitchen, where Maria hummed softly as she brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. James was already outside, carefully polishing the vintage car I'd bought the week I moved in. A car I could enjoy without anyone rolling their eyes at the expense. Breakfast was a calm affair. Fresh croissants, fruit, and a cup of Earl Grey, sitting at the round oak table, where I could look out over the garden and the skyline beyond. No phone calls demanding my attention. No passive-aggressive messages from Damon or Kalia. Just peace. Real, unshakable peace. I spent my mornings in the library, a sanctuary of leather-bound books and sunlight, where I finally had time to read works I'd long ignored. Books about philosophy, art, history, and even a few novels that had sat on dusty shelves for years, waiting for a moment when I could actually enjoy them. I'd sip my coffee slowly, sometimes marking passages in pencil, sometimes simply letting words wash over me, a gentle reminder that my mind was still sharp, still alive, still my own. Afternoons belonged to the garden. I'd kneel in the soil, planting tulips, roses, and vegetables I could finally eat without guilt. There was a satisfaction in the rhythm, the digging, the planting, the watering, that grounded me. Each bloom felt like a tiny victory over the years of belittlement I'd endured. Maria would sometimes bring iced tea or a small snack, and we'd talk quietly about the neighborhood, the city, and occasionally about my family. Though mostly about the lives we were building here, free from their toxic shadow. And then there was Sarah, my granddaughter. She had become a constant presence, a bridge to the family I could finally trust, in part, though carefully. The first time she came, she looked nervous, wringing her hands as she stepped over the threshold of my sanctuary. But there was no demand in her demeanor, no expectation that I would fulfill some financial or emotional obligation. She simply wanted to share her life with me. "Grandma," she began hesitantly, I wanted to show you something." We spent hours together that first day. She shared stories about her students, her struggles with student loans, and her dreams of making a difference in the classroom. She showed me photos of her art projects and her students' smiling faces. And I told her stories too, about Robert, about my childhood, about the lonely years spent in Damon's home, where every day felt like a negotiation for survival. I told her about my fear, my anger, and my triumphs, and she listened, really listened. Her visits became weekly rituals. Sometimes she brought coffee from a cafe she loved, other times baked cookies, always quietly, always thoughtfully. She didn't try to manipulate me or guilt me into doing anything. She wanted to know me, not the lottery winner, not the estranged grandmother, but Anita, the woman who had finally stood up for herself and claimed a life of dignity. Through her, I began to understand the depth of what I'd lost and what I'd gained. Damon and Kalia had robbed me of years, but Sarah reminded me that innocence still survived. Children remembered genuine love, even when surrounded by cruelty. And through careful planning with Harold, I ensured that Tyler and Emma could access the college funds I'd set aside, only if they maintained a genuine, independent relationship with me. I wasn't bribing them to like me. I was creating an opportunity for them to experience what it felt like to have a grandmother who truly cared. I also started to invest my newfound resources into the broader community. The Riverside Community Senior Center received a new wing dedicated to programs that allowed elderly people to maintain independence and dignity. I funded the Robert Henderson Memorial Garden, a sanctuary where seniors could gather without feeling like burdens. And quietly, I helped individuals who had been trapped in toxic family situations. Mrs. Patterson, 81, moved into a dignified, rent-controlled apartment I purchased for her. Mr. Rodriguez, 74, was able to leave his daughter's couch and live independently with home health support. These weren't grand gestures in the public sense, but to those who received them, they were life-changing. Every action reinforced a principle I had finally learned. Age, experience, and resources are powerful, but only when wielded with self-respect and compassion. One evening, as I tended to the roses, I paused to watch the sunset. The sky burned in shades of pink and orange. The city lights flickered on below, and I felt a contentment that had been impossible for decades. I realized that my life was no longer dictated by fear, guilt, or the manipulation of others. I had created something rare, a life built on my terms, with people who truly valued me. And in that moment, I whispered quietly, not to anyone but to myself, "This is the life I was always meant to have. Not wealth, not power, not the grudging affection of family who saw me as a burden, but this peace, this dignity, this love that is chosen every day." The test had been long, painful, and at times excruciating, but I passed. And now, for the first time in decades, my real life had finally begun. The days after Sarah's first visit settled into a rhythm that felt almost magical, like I had stepped into a life I'd only dreamed of. I woke without anxiety, without the dread of sudden demands, and moved through my home with a freedom I hadn't known for years. Every room reminded me that I belonged here, not as a tolerated guest, not as a burden, but as a woman who had fought for and claimed her life. I spent mornings in the library, alternating between reading and writing letters to friends I hadn't contacted in decades. Some were old colleagues, others were former neighbors, but all were people who remembered the real me before my family's neglect had taken its toll. I wrote slowly, savoring the words, delighting in the act of being heard and acknowledged, without the fear of judgment or ridicule. The afternoons were for the garden. The roses were thriving, their blooms brilliant against the carefully manicured green, and the vegetable beds yielded more than enough to feed Maria, James, and me. Each plant I tended felt like a tiny assertion of my autonomy, a quiet rebellion against the years I had been forced to live in someone else's rules. Then there was the new community I was becoming part of. Eleanor Hartwell, my bridge partner and sharp-witted friend, had introduced me to a network of women and men who had all faced similar struggles. We exchanged stories of family neglect, of adult children who had taken our kindness for granted, of people who had assumed that age made us invisible. But now, here we were, fully visible, fully alive, and fully respected. Tuesdays became sacred for bridge, laughter, and shared memories, punctuated by Eleanor's sly commentary and Margaret Chen's gentle teasing. We were no longer victims. We were women and men with histories that demanded acknowledgement, and now, finally, received it. Sarah's weekly visits became a highlight. She shared her successes, her challenges, and her small victories, and I shared mine. She didn't ask for money, advice, or favors. She wanted only to connect with me. And in doing so, she reminded me that not all family was lost. Children could grow up with genuine love if given the right example. I began to see her as a kind of bridge between the past and the future, a reminder that innocence and sincerity could survive even in a toxic environment. It was during one of these afternoons, while we planted sunflowers together, that Sarah confided something that made my heart ache and swell at the same time. "Grandma," she said softly, brushing dirt off her hands, "I used to be scared of you when I was little. Not you exactly, but everything around me. I never wanted to upset Mom or Damon, so I stayed quiet. I didn't know how to stand up for myself, and I thought I'd lost you forever." I put my hand on hers, feeling the tiny warmth of youth against mine. "You didn't lose me, sweetheart. You just didn't know I'd be here for you when you were ready. And now we are." That moment crystallized something I had been realizing for months. My past family had tried to define me by their needs and perceptions, but I had refused. I had claimed my dignity, my home, my life. And now I had the power to define my relationships on my own terms. No more manipulation, no more guilt, no more control. If someone wanted to be part of my life, they had to respect me fully, not just the idea of me. The trust I set up for Tyler and Emma was another layer of this philosophy. I had seen firsthand how adults tried to manipulate children, and I was determined not to perpetuate that cycle. The funds were theirs, but only if they maintained an independent, genuine relationship with me. It was a lesson in integrity, respect, and autonomy, values I had spent decades being denied. Outside my home, life carried on with quiet dignity. Mrs. Patterson had moved into her apartment and now hosted small gatherings with other seniors. Mr. Rodriguez's health improved with home care, and he finally had the independence he'd longed for. Each success reminded me that wealth without purpose was empty, but wealth used to restore dignity and freedom could change lives. One evening, I sat on my veranda, glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights flicker on like stars that had fallen to earth. I thought about the past, about Damon, Kalia, Lisa, and all the pain they had caused. I didn't feel anger anymore, not the sharp, consuming anger that had dominated my early months of freedom, but a quiet satisfaction. I had survived, I had built, and I had protected the part of myself that mattered most, my dignity. And in that quiet, Sarah appeared, holding her phone. "Grandma," she said, eyes wide, "look at this." She showed me a picture she had taken at school. A group of her students gathered around a large painting they had created. In the corner, she had signed it to Grandma Anita, who believes in us. I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. That painting represented something far more valuable than money. It represented the genuine bonds I could create when people were treated with respect and love, not as resources or obligations. I realized then that my real wealth wasn't measured in lottery winnings or expensive homes. It was measured in moments like this: laughter, connection, respect, and the quiet knowledge that I was no longer a victim. I had chosen myself, and in doing so, I had chosen a life filled with authenticity, peace, and love that was freely given, not demanded. The weeks passed, and my life settled into a rhythm that was equal parts luxurious and liberating. Mornings were for quiet reflection and tea in the sunroom, where sunlight streamed across the marble floors and gilded furniture without ever feeling gaudy. I would watch the city wake up below, breathing in a freedom I hadn't known for decades. Afternoons were spent in the garden, tending to roses, hydrangeas, and vegetables that thrived under my care with Maria's watchful eye. Every bloom, every perfectly watered plant was a reminder that I was finally in control of my own world. Sarah continued to visit faithfully. At 24, she was now fully grown but retained the innocence and honesty that made her presence so refreshing. She shared stories from her teaching job, her struggles with student loans, and her dreams for the future. We laughed, debated, and sometimes just sat in silence, enjoying each other's company, without agendas or obligations. She never asked for money, advice, or favors. She wanted only to connect, and in doing so, she reminded me that family could exist without the toxicity and manipulation I had endured. One particular afternoon, as we painted sunflowers in my art studio, Sarah looked up at me and said, "Grandma, I want to make a promise. I will never treat anyone the way Mom or Damon treated you. I want to be different. I want to be someone who lifts people up, not drags them down." Her words struck me with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride for the woman she was becoming, and sorrow for the years she had spent in a family that taught her the wrong lessons. It was then that I knew my real victory wasn't just the lottery or the freedom it brought me. It was the chance to influence the next generation in a positive way. Tyler and Emma would have their inheritance waiting, but only if they chose to build a genuine relationship with me, separate from their parents' manipulation. Sarah's choices reinforced that this approach could work. Nurture independence, insist on respect, and let love grow without strings attached. Meanwhile, I found myself quietly investing in the lives of other elderly people who had been treated as burdens. Mrs. Patterson, 81, had moved into her own apartment in a small building I purchased. Now, she had privacy, independence, and dignity, things she had never experienced while living in her nephew's basement. Mr. Rodriguez, 74, was no longer sleeping on his daughter's couch, but had affordable housing and home health services, allowing him to live without fear of being treated like a problem. Each person I helped was a reminder that age and circumstance did not define worth. Only respect, care, and autonomy did. One evening, as I sat in the garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on the long journey that had brought me here. The pain inflicted by Damon, Kalia, and Lisa was real, but it no longer held power over me. I had transformed my anger and frustration into purpose. Every action I took, whether for myself or others, was a declaration. I would never again allow my dignity to be compromised for someone else's convenience. A surprising development came when Sarah suggested a small project at my home, a community reading program for local children. She wanted to bring books, art supplies, and stories to kids who didn't have access to creative outlets. I agreed immediately. We transformed my library into a safe, colorful space filled with laughter, questions, and learning. For the first time in years, I was experiencing the joy of giving without fear of being used or manipulated in return. One rainy afternoon, as the kids painted and read, I realized just how far I had come. I was no longer defined by the cruelty of my family or the limitations they had tried to impose. I was defined by my choices, my refusal to accept abuse, my insistence on respect, and my commitment to creating meaningful connections. Every smile, every moment of curiosity from the children, every laugh shared with Sarah or my friends Eleanor and Margaret was proof that life could be rich and fulfilling without sacrificing dignity. Later that week, I received an unexpected letter from Lisa. Her handwriting was hurried and shaky. She apologized for her past behavior, admitting that she had been complicit in the cruelty I endured, and that she now understood the value of true respect and love. She wanted to rebuild a relationship, but on my terms. I read the letter carefully and set it aside. I wasn't angry, I wasn't resentful. I simply knew that forgiveness did not mean forgetting or returning to a toxic dynamic. If Lisa truly wanted a relationship, she would have to earn it with consistent respect and genuine care, not guilt or manipulation. That night, as I sipped Earl Grey in my library, I thought about the years I had spent feeling small, unimportant, and powerless. Those years were gone, replaced by a life where I was fully seen, fully respected, and fully alive. The lottery had given me wealth, yes, but the real gift was the power to enforce boundaries, the freedom to choose relationships, and the knowledge that I could create a life that honored my worth. I closed my eyes, feeling the soft weight of contentment settle over me. The city lights twinkled outside, the rain pattered gently on the roof, and somewhere in the distance, laughter from the community reading program drifted into the night. I smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. I had passed the test life had given me, and now, finally, my real story had begun. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of my bedroom, catching the crystal chandeliers in a warm, golden glow. For the first time in decades, I woke up without tension knotting my shoulders or guilt pressing on my chest. My life was mine, completely and unapologetically. Maria hummed in the kitchen as she brewed coffee, and James was already outside polishing the driveway's fountain. Everything in my home reflected care, not control, beauty, not manipulation. This was peace, and I had earned it. As I sipped my tea in the sunroom, Sarah bounded in with a sketchbook in hand. "Grandma, look," she said, showing me a vibrant watercolor she had painted for the reading program. Her enthusiasm was infectious. We spent the morning planning activities, laughing at silly mistakes, and creating an environment where creativity thrived. For the first time, I wasn't just present, I mattered. Every word I spoke was listened to, every suggestion respected, That simple acknowledgement of my existence felt revolutionary. Then came a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Patterson, holding a basket of freshly baked scones. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "You gave me a home. Yes, but more importantly, you gave me dignity. No one else ever did that." Her words hit me in a way money never could. All the lottery winnings in the world wouldn't have created this feeling. The satisfaction of knowing I was making a real difference in people's lives. Later that afternoon, I received another letter. This time, it was from Tyler and Emma. They had been writing to me for months, carefully, tentatively, learning to see me as someone more than a source of family drama. Tyler had drawn a comic about his school day, and Emma had included a poem about friendship. Their parents were no longer part of the equation in these exchanges. It was raw, unfiltered, and pure, real family connection, finally blossoming in a safe space. By evening, I was reflecting on the past months. Every confrontation, every boundary I had drawn had led me here. Damon, Kalia, and Lisa were still out there, living in their world of financial stress and guilt. But I no longer needed their approval, their forgiveness, or their recognition. I had everything I could possibly need: autonomy, respect, and love from people who genuinely cared about me. I picked up my phone and called Harold. "Let's finalize the trust for Tyler and Emma's education," I said. "I want them to know that opportunities exist, but only if they choose to build genuine relationships. No strings, no pressure, just respect and love." Harold's voice was warm, appreciative, and a little awed. "It's a perfect plan. They'll have every chance to know you as their grandmother and make decisions for themselves when they're ready." With that settled, I sat in my library, surrounded by the comfort of my books and memories of Robert, and allowed myself to feel something I had almost forgotten: true, unshakable contentment. My garden awaited tomorrow. Sarah would visit next week, and countless small moments of joy filled my life every day. This was more than wealth. It was freedom, respect, and genuine love. Finally, I looked out at the city skyline as night fell. The lights twinkled like stars, each one a reminder that life could be beautiful when built on your own terms. I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and neglect. I had claimed my power, and in doing so, I had created a sanctuary, not just of walls and furniture, but of dignity, independence, and chosen family. I placed my cup of tea down and whispered to the quiet room, "This is just the beginning. The rest of my life belongs to me." And it did, truly, completely, and beautifully. The test was over. I had passed, and my real life, free from abuse, full of respect, and surrounded by people who truly valued me, had finally begun.